So, chapter 2, the title of which is, interestingly, Producing Knowledge About Sports and Society. So, this chapter is really about how research is done. And we're going to use kind of an interesting little story that a sociologist experienced to go through this and understand more about how sociological research is done. It's very important to understand this because, as I said in the first lecture, there is so much misinformation floating around. Um, and this concept that there is no truth or a variety of other clever things that people are saying. So I want to read you, first of all, I'll read you a quote from every chapter. There's 4 or 5 of them at the beginning of every chapter, but this one, okay, Sinclair Lewis is one of my favorite authors, old-timey guy, but wrote a book that I read many, many, many years ago, and it's very young, called It Can't Happen Here, which is exactly what it sounds like. A totalitarian state and a variety of other things. And so this quote from him, and he just diagrams how it can happen so simply, quickly, I mean. So here's a quote from him. "It is foolish to be convinced without evidence, but is equally foolish to refuse to be convinced by real evidence." Okay. So what does the sociology of sport really investigate? We talked a little bit in the last chapter about the kind of the, laundry list of stuff, but here's what they're telling you. The sociology of sport investigates the deeper game. Isn't that a great terminology? The deeper game that is associated with sports in society, which are these 5 points. The social and critical contexts in which sport exists. 2, the connections between those contexts and sports. 3, the social worlds that people create when they participate in sports. An example, as I said at the beginning here, we're going to explore is youth soccer and gender identity behaviors. So interesting. 4, the experience of individuals and groups within those social worlds. And 5, the organization of sports and how people are influenced by sports. So, social research. As we study sports, research and theories called social research are used to produce social knowledge. And social knowledge consists of the investigations to seek answers to questions about social worlds, this is a key point, by systematically gathering and analyzing data. Social theories, so that is social knowledge. Investigations to seek answers to questions about social worlds by systematically gathering and analyzing data. Okay? Social theories, they are logically interrelated explanations of the actions and the relationships of human beings and the organizations and dynamics of social worlds. Now, research and theories go hand in hand because the research creates and tests the validity of the theories. You have a theory, and then you do research that either winds up supporting your theory or not supporting your theory, but you have to do the research to find out, okay? So you want to find out the validity of theories, and then in conversely, the theories support asking good research questions that can make sense of the data and accumulated research. So you need to frame your research questions in really good ways to get accurate and valid data, okay? So the knowledge produced by the sociology of sport helps us to understand the actions of individuals, the dynamics of social relationships, and then, of course, the organization of social worlds and sports by which we become more informed participants and citizens. And yes, that's true. That's why I read you that Sinclair Lewis quote. The goal of Chapter 2 is to answer the following questions. How is knowledge produced in the sociology of sport? And what are the primary research methods used by scholars who study the sociology of sport? Why do scholars, this is a really important question, a key question, we approached it a bit in the first chapter. Why do scholars often use a critical approach when doing research and developing theories and investigating sport? So how do we produce that knowledge? And address those three questions. We all use personal theories that are developed by how we learn to navigate our social worlds. We talked about this before. We learn how to navigate our social worlds, our personal lives, by observing how others act in certain situations. And then we use that information to develop our kind of experience-based explanations, or what is called personal theories about our own actions, those of others, and the social worlds we're involved in. So these personal theories are our ideas about, explanations of and for social life and the context in which it occurs. They're our guides to our daily life as we make decisions and interact with others. So what about, like, let's use family life as an example. You observe and live in a family. You are unconsciously almost collecting information and developing explanations to make sense of your family life. In the process, you develop kind of educated hunches, in quotes, for why your family is more or less loving, strict, organized, wealthy, poor, or supportive than other families. And the goal of your experience-based data is to make sense out of that whole gestalt, that whole experience in your family, and to gain control of your life and the social worlds in which you live. So personal theories are what are called forms of practical knowledge. And we use practical knowledge to anticipate events, okay? Because without that, we would be just kind of passive responders to our social worlds. We'd be victims of culture and society. With theories, those personal theories, we are active agents in participating and making changes. I love this concept that Pierre Bourdieu, a French philosopher, referred to as cultural capital. Okay, so, and the more cultural capital we have, the more ability we have to navigate in a variety of social worlds. So what cultural capital is each of us acquires and accumulates cultural capital as we expand our social and cultural experiences and make sense of them. And even though we each have different experiences and opportunities, we still can convert them into what's called cultural capital, which is the ability to navigate, manage, and control our lives. Let's say that again. The ability to manage, first to navigate, manage, and control our lives. By having an understanding of how our personal observations and experiences inform our lives, in this class, it's going to enable you to compare your theories about sports and sports experiences with the research and theories in sociology of sport. And that should really be interesting for you to do. Because while personal research focuses on our immediate social worlds, we don't usually systematically test them or compare them with other theories. Now, academic research, unlike personal research, goes beyond our personal experiences and our social situations of just one person, ourselves, okay? Because information and data are collected from people or situations that can provide an answer to specific questions. And then that data is analyzed by using valid research methods. Then the data is peer-reviewed and published. No valid research. Well, let me put it this way. No or virtually no research is valid if it has not been reviewed by peer committees to be sure no errors were made, either statistically or in terms of questions asked or a variety of other things. And then it has to be published. And once it's published in an academic journal, usually, then other people read it that are knowledgeable who receive those journals. So it actually kind of gets informally peer reviewed a second time. And if there's problems with the research, it's people catch it, right? Who are peer reviewing it or reading it in the journals that it's published in. So doing research. Here's a case study. Now this is the one that I told you was kind of fun to read about and humorous but sad also in a way. And that's Michael Mesner's experience with his young son at a soccer get together. So Michael Mesner is a sociologist at University of Southern California, and he wrote a book after this experience with the son, you'll see why, called Taking the Field, Women, Men, and Sports. And he did much more research. It wasn't just this one experience, but that's what triggered his research into women and men in sports. So in the text, and they tell about Mesner's, he describes an event that in part inspired his research on the connection between sports and gender in the United States. Here's the event. I hope you read this because you should, for sure. It's in much more detail than what I'm going to repeat here, but this is the overview. So he took his son to the opening ceremony of a youth soccer season. And the kids were all about 4 and 5 years old. So he took his son, so he was at a boys team. The boys 4 and 5 years old. Their team name, and they all picked their own team names, was Sea Monsters. Okay. They were assigned team colors, apparently, by the organization, which were green and blue. And so they had a banner that they had made with the team colors. They won a prize for the banner, and the boys were very proud of that, and they posed for pictures in front of the banner. Okay, that all is great. But in another group that was, a little bit away from where they were, was a group of 4 and 5-year-old girls, and their team name was Barbie Girls. Now, they do have a team banner, but it isn't the team banner that they're displaying. They're ignoring the team banner because they've created a much more powerful symbol. And that they are the only team there among a group of other teams, girl teams and boy teams, right? With a team float. The team float, I can just envision this, has a 3-foot-tall Barbie doll. And she's dressed in the team colors of green and white in a cheerleader costume. And she's on a rotating pedestal going round and round and round on her little float with a boombox. So as the boombox volume gets higher, and 4 or 5 of the girls begin to sing a Barbie song, join hands, and walk around the float. And eventually about a dozen other girls join them, and they're walking around the float, holding hands, singing their Barbie song. And the boombox and the Barbie doll is rotating on the float. Now, the Sea Monster boys begin to watch and listen, right? At first, individually. One notices, and looks and listens, and then another one notices. Then some of the other boys notice, and they begin to shout, "No Barbie, no Barbie." Well, the girls didn't really respond. I don't think, well, anyway, we can read the research, it explains it more, but I don't think they really didn't get what was going on with the boys. So they didn't respond in any way, the girls. And the lack of response from the girls escalates the boys' behavior to get a response, And the boys are dashing in and invading the girls' space and yelling menacingly. And then the girls look puzzled and shrink back. Okay. Now, this event caused Messner, the father of one of the boys, to think critically. Okay. He didn't just react, he started thinking critically. Of course, he's a sociologist, right? About youth sports, both as a father and as a sociologist. So, and here's some of the things he thought. Though the boy's actions did not actually hurt anyone, he wondered if certain sports are organized to reaffirm ideas about masculinity and femininity, so they make it seem normal for boys and men to express aggression and intimidation. For example, the AYSO, the American Youth Soccer Organization, segregates soccer teams by sex, eliminating opportunities for boys and girls to play together, and discovered that they often share interests and characteristics. If this is so, what implications does it have for how we identify ourselves, how we form relationships, and how we organize our social worlds? This was the beginning of the 5-step process for producing knowledge in the sociology of sport. That is a standard 5-step process, and it's also the one that Messner used. So the first step is you develop research questions. Research always begins with observations, his observing what happened with the sea monsters and the Barbie girls, right? Those are the observations, followed by questions about what is observed and what is not observed, and we just heard some of his questions about it. And Messner asked critical questions about culture, social interaction, and social structure. Now remember, last chapter we learned that those are the 3 components of sociological research: culture, social interaction, social structure. Okay? So when you apply Messner's research to that Sea Monsters Barbie Girls event, let's start with culture. Okay? The questions he asked, the research question he asks are: what gender-related words, meanings, and symbols do American children learn to identify themselves and others? How do children learn and use, and then that was what, and then the next question, number 2, is how do children learn and use cultural ideas, beliefs to separate people into 2 sex categories that they see as, quote, opposites? Okay, so that's the cultural questions. Here's the social interaction questions. 1, how do children perform gender? In other words, how do they act out being male or female? So how do children perform gender in their everyday lives? And how do they learn to successfully present themselves as either to others, as boys or girls? The second question, what happens in their relationships if they don't perform gender as others expect them to? So first, Messner did, did we do social structure? Yes, okay. So first, Messner did a review of the literature on the on the subject of gender in sports. Okay. He looked at 326 sources that are listed in his book. But when he first did the research of looking at sources, it's called a review of literature. Before you write a master's thesis or a dissertation, you do a review of the literature to see who else has written on a similar subject and what they've had to say. You review the literature, okay? And their research, how they did their research. So this scientific review of the literature revealed that there was a need to know more about the relationship between sports and ideas of gender. So step 2, he's developed the research questions. So step 2, he needs to select, Messner, the appropriate theory and research methods to do his research. So once a theory or a combination of theories, it can be a combination of theories, is selected, Then there's a guide for the research questions and the research methods. So the selecting theories you can see on page 33, there's a complete explanation of the theoretical perspectives, okay? And I put up some videos for you on that as well. Messner wound up using all three of the theoretical perspectives. He used cultural, social interaction, and social structure, okay? Under the cultural, he used cultural theories because they explain what we know about the ways that people think and express their values, ideas, and beliefs as they live together and create social worlds. That's what cultural theories do. They also emphasize that people use symbols, i.e., sea monsters, Barbie girls. Those are symbols, right? They emphasize that people create symbols that give meaning to aspects of their worlds that are important to them. Okay. In turn, those symbols and meanings influence their feelings, thoughts, and actions. Cultural theories also use concepts of values, norms, ideas, beliefs, ideologies, symbols, and language because those are the tools that people use to make sense of their world, as we talked about in chapter 1. Cultural theories also show the importance of symbols such as names, colors, uniforms, banners, songs, and chants that were used to represent teams. Those are all very powerful symbols. Think about colors for boys and girls historically, pink and blue, that type, or blue and pink, since I said boys first. You get the point. And here's a really key point about cultural theories. They also create specific narratives. Narrative means story, okay? So they also create specific narratives, which are explanations that people use or the stories they tell to explain and make sense of their choices and actions. We will go into all of these much deeper in future chapters with more examples and that type of thing. This is why Messner chose the three theories to do his research on the sea monsters and the Barbie girls. Okay? So those were the cultural theories. Now the interactionist theories explain what we know about the origins, dynamics, and consequences of social interaction among people in particular social worlds. So though these theories, the social interactionist theories, focus on the processes of social learning and development, such as how social relationships are contexts in which we know and give meaning to ourselves, to others, and the events in our lives. You can see how that would apply to what went on with the boys and the girls in that situation as well. They include concepts such as social interaction, socialization. Little boys and girls are very powerfully socialized into their gender, and we'll talk about that. I'll tell you some examples of that I have observed when we get to the chapter on gender. So social interaction, socialization, role models, significant others, self-concept, identity, labeling, deviance, and stereotyping. Those are all powerful concepts in social interaction. And I'm sure you can see how they apply to gender. And then youth sports, here's a really important concept. Youth sports are what are called sites. They're identifiable social places or contexts where people learn what it means, and children learn, to be male or female within youth sports. So those are the social interactionist theories. The structural theories explain what we know about different forms of social organizations. Remember, this is the macro level of looking at institutional types of structures. So we look at different forms of social organization and how they affect actions and relationships. So structural theories focus on how relationships are organized and influence people's power to access, people's access to power, to authority, material resources, economic opportunities, and other resources. Can you see how those are larger structural issues? Okay. They contribute to the understanding and identifying of the social impact of these recurring social relationships and the kind of patterns of social organization that exist in everyday life. So the institutions of family, religion, education, the economy, politics, the media, those are all institutions, which is why we talk about this being as a macro institutional level perspective. Also, it involves concepts such as status, roles, authority, power, social class, and social inequality. And it was the structural theories that alerted Messner to the ways that sports organizations are, quote, gendered. It was those structural theories and what he was observing. So, how do you select your research methods? Now you have the theories, right? And now you need to select your research methods. So, social scientists can use a combination of research methods, but there are really only two main types, depending on the topic: quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative tells you right off the top. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's all about numbers and statistics, okay? So that involves collecting information, data, about people and social worlds in numbers and analyzing the numbers using statistical procedures and tests. And that is used, that method, the quantitative method, is used when an explanation or understanding of the research can be explained by an overall view, the big statistical picture of a population, media content, event, etc. We had a lot of statistical analysis that we heard during COVID, or it certainly it's applied to any kind of medical research. So much percentage of Americans between ages are obese, right? Or have heart disease, that type of thing. That's quantitative statistical analysis, okay? The qualitative analysis involves collecting information about specific people, media content, event, or social worlds, and identifying patterns and unique features using interpretive procedures and tests such as in-depth interviews, observational studies, sample documents, or media content, analyzing media content. Since we're talking about gender, I often have my sociology students, and not often, every term, do a content analysis of various forms of media and the depiction. It's interesting because it goes right along with this of for boys and girls. What kind of content do books designed for little boys have? What kind of content do books designed for little girls have? What about cards? Baby card, congratulations on baby cards. They're very different if it's for a boy or a girl, if you look at those, that type of thing. So that's a level of analysis, because with qualitative analysis, the objective is to discover the meanings and ideologies that influence what people say and do. For example, it might be used to understand why young people drop out of sports. Okay? You can have a statistical, quantitative analysis of how many young people drop out of sports, but though that isn't going to tell you the why. You need qualitative analysis for that. You need to talk to them, right? And find out why. Okay. So sociologists who study sports in society generally use surveys and interviews, observation, and text analysis, which is quantitative. So I want to explain how not to do this survey, because there's some great examples in an older sociology text about how not to do research, and one of them is a survey which they gave to college students, because what am I trying to say? Companies do this all the time. And it was a survey that the conclusion, which was touted in an advertisement, was that uh, 9 out of 10 college students prefer Levi's jeans. This was done many, many, many years ago. Well, guess what? The only choice was Levi's jeans on the survey, right? So that's loading the question. Okay. You can ask you can ask a specific group of people what they prefer by choosing the people who will give you the answer you want. When they ask people, this is also very old research. I'm sure there's much newer research that's not valid that's done this way, but this came from that old textbook. So you can ask people if they prefer American cars or foreign cars. If you want the answer to be American cars, you're Chevy and you want to put it in an ad or something, you ask people who are employed at an American manufacturing plant for American cars. If you ask people if you're a Japanese company, say car company, you ask people who own Japanese imports. And boy, you'll find out that 75% of Americans between ages da 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 and da 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 prefer American cars if you're asking a certain very carefully chosen piece of the population, and the vice versa for the other example. So that's why it's so important to be ethical when you do this work. So this is where they're talking about that. I wanted to explain to you how not to do a survey. So surveys are one way that this research is done. Observation. There's two kinds of observation that social scientists do. One is non-participant, just plain observation where you just go and you watch people and you take notes. Participant observation is you kind of live with the people. It's what anthropologists do when they do field work. They'll go live with a tribal group somewhere in the jungle, right? They're not those people, but they're living there and they're eating the same food. They're doing what they're more involved than just being observers that stand aside. So that's two kinds of observation. Now, you've decided which kind of research you're going to use. Now you have to collect and analyze the data. So with cultural theories, for example, what Messner did was he collected information on team names, team colors, their uniforms, banners, songs, chants, etc., and that the players and the coaches had selected. Why did he collect that in the cultural theories? Because they're symbols, team colors, team names, team mascots, etc., chants. They're symbols people use to represent themselves in some way. And what symbols are concrete representations of the values, beliefs, and moral principles around which people organize their lives. Symbols are nebulous, right? They're not three-dimensional, but you can make them three-dimensional by saying, I'm a sea monster, or I'm a Barbie girl, right? That, what am I trying to say? It puts in the real world, in the three-dimensional world, these ideas one has with something actual. So Messner did some research on team names, and out of 156 team names, 15% of the girls' teams and 1% of the boys' teams chose, I'm surprised any percent of the boys' teams, but chose sweet, cutesy names like Pink Flamingo, etc. Overall, of course, the boys avoided cute and neutral names. They didn't even use neutral names. They avoided cute and neutral names in favor of a power name. Monster, right? Sea monster. There's a powerful word. Okay, the interactionist theories in the research, he observed the actions to see how they performed gender, the kids, when they interacted with each other. Most noticeably, when the boys objected to the girls' celebration of the Barbie icon and tried to disrupt it. Okay, that was a very strong uh, action that the boys took to run over there and yell at the girls. Right. Structural theories. He collected data on adult division of labor. This is interesting. And who held positions of power in the AYSO group that these kids were involved with. Over 80% of head and assistant coaches were men, while 86% of team managers, dubbed team moms, were women. Now, step 4, you have to take those findings and use them to produce conclusions. And Mesner had detailed explanations in his conclusions of connections between gender and sports in the United States. And there's figure 2.3 has his overall findings there. Then, as I said previously, step 5 of this process, 5 steps to the whole research process, you have to have it peer reviewed and you have to have it published. Okay. So what is the impact of sociology of sport knowledge? What purpose is served? Well, it can help detect oversights as well as bias, uh, and provide validity to problems in personal theories, and help us make more informed decisions about sports in our lives when we're exploring things like selecting sport programs for our children or becoming coaches in schools or youth programs. Maybe we want to create policies to increase healthy sport participation. And here's a key one. We could all vote, voting on ballot measures regarding the use of public money to build stadiums. Overall, this research enables us to view sports from many perspectives and to go beyond our personal experiences, which is so important. If we just rely on our personal experiences to understand things, we live in a bubble, right? Relates to us, may be true for us, but it isn't in generally for everybody else or people who are different from us. So, as you might imagine, there's a lot of resistance to the application of research-based knowledge when it raises questions about the status quo. It's often, for one thing, it's often seen as very threatening or even subversive to those who benefit from the current system in sport. And that's why it's so important for knowledge to be widespread so that decisions about putting it to use can become part of a democratic political process rather than to enhance the control of powerful people. Therefore, knowledge can empower people as they participate in creating a sustainable, just, and equitable way of life. So true. Why I became a sociologist and an anthropologist, because that is a key point. Knowledge can empower people as they participate in creating a sustainable and just and equitable way of life. So how do we use a critical approach, critical analysis to produce knowledge? A key point to always keep in mind is that everyone doesn't benefit from sports or the status quo in any area, but we're studying sports. So a key point is that everyone does not benefit from sports in the same ways, and people may be disadvantaged by how they are organized, and we will see that in future chapters. Additionally, a critical approach heightens our awareness that knowledge about social worlds can be applied in many ways to transform dysfunctional cultures. So you have this information. What are you going to do with it? Use it for good. Use it for change, and particularly to change dysfunctional cultures. For example, reducing male-on-male violence and result in serious injuries. We'll look at that There's a whole chapter on violence in sports. Okay. So the very last chapter of the book, when we get there, is organized to answer the question, just do it. Just do what? I'm sorry. It's organized to answer the question, just do what? And that refers to the Nike slogan, just do it, which Messner, of Messner's book, not our book, but Messner's book. Messner's point is, just do what? Because without critically thinking about what it is, just do it, what it is, we reproduce sports as they are, rather than actively changing and developing them to be fair and equitable. Hey, that's chapter 2.